privilege to be able to go and do missionary work in China, and I felt the Lord wanted me to be a spokesperson on behalf of an orphanage in China that is not able to freely express their mission because of the persecution of the communist government against faith. It's illegal to evangelize in China. And China makes up 1/5 of the world population, but most people in China still have never heard Jesus' name. It's something really astonishing to ponder that. In addition, and it's illegal to evangelize, so there are many people who suffer for the faith. And yet, even in the midst of the persecution, no surprise with the history that we've seen of how Christ works, the faith is growing more rapidly there than anywhere else in the world. We also know and have heard, how many of you have heard about the one-child policy? Is that a term that's familiar to you? I had heard that term and didn't really understand what that exactly meant. Like, were they really still enforcing it? Everything? Well, they do. And to varying degrees of severity across the nation, they have the population control police. And they enforce the law. What this means is that each family is only allowed to have one child, and if there are more children, then it means forced abortion. By the time an average woman in China is 30, she will have had 4 or 5 forced abortions. When we think about this, the reality of the suffering that this means, we're talking about the families of 1/5 of the world population that are all directly suffering from forced abortion. When you think about that, it's just too massive to even comprehend. It's so much suffering. This is something that touched me profoundly when I began to learn the stories of individual people and realize that this was not this sort of far-off thing, but actually happening in every family. When I was in the novitiate, discerning a consecrated vocation, there were some missionaries from China that came to share with the sisters, and little did I know what God's plan was how it was going to unfold in my life with His will for my vocation. But that began this kind of call. I felt this deep desire to pray for the people of China. And then God opened doors in the discernment process after showing me that He wanted me to use my voice on behalf of those who couldn't speak for themselves there in China. So in light of this next song I want to share with you is called Can You Hear Me? It's a song of healing for post-abortive women who have suffered from abortion. And it's asking for the healing of God, particularly through Blessed Mother, taking the children and caring for them. And I would ask that you please join me in praying for the end of the one-child policy in China. The beautiful thing is that it's on its way out. I mean, it's not going to stand. It's going to pass away because it's so self-destructive. The complications and implications of it are just massive. For example, this really opened my eyes when I learned this. In China, there is no such thing as Social Security. So when the family's only allowed to have one child, the only means to their Social Security for parents is having a son that will provide for them in their elderly age. So, because the girl will go and leave to be with his family if she's married. So if you had the only option for you to have anyone to care for you, pay for your needs when you were older, and you could only have one child, and then what would you do? And let's say you didn't know God. You never even heard Jesus' name before. What would you do? Well, you probably would want a healthy son. So at this point, almost all girls, most of them are aborted before they're born. And then most of the children that are in the orphanages are handicapped little boys at this point. But we say, well, why would they just, are they just mean giving away the children to orphanages, abandoning them if they have a special need? Well, what if you lived in a country where in order to get medical care, you had to pay beforehand for the cost of what the thing was that needed to take place? What if you had cancer and you had to pay them $200,000 up front for your treatment? Could you do it? That opened my eyes so much when I learned that this, the suffering of the people and the whole state of the situation is far more complex than just people with ill will. It's far more complex than that. But anyway, there's so much to say about it. I could just go on and on, but basically, please join me in praying for the end to one-child policy. It's very beautiful because we see over this past year there have been things leaking out in the media, and for the first time since the institution of the one-child policy in '79, the government is starting to express reconsideration of the policy. This is really, it's unprecedented, it's very exciting, and we know it's because of prayers. So, in the meantime, please pray, because every day in China, 36,000 babies are killed through forced abortion. And up to this point now, there have been over 300 million that have died from forced abortion in China, which is 400 million, which is 1/3 times our entire country of the United States. So if we think about that, again, like, how can we process that as too much? But we have hope, because it's not just, because our yes to God, one person at a time, can actually, it does change the world. Mother Teresa showed us that. Blessed Mother shows us that. So we don't have to give up about this. I mean, we have to acknowledge the truth of the suffering and try to respond, but we don't have to despair, because nothing's impossible with God. I'm talking too much. I'm going to sing the song. Okay, so this is called Can You Hear Me? And please join in praying with me for all those who have suffered from the pain of abortion, and particularly those women in China who have been forced to abort their children, forcibly, like, dragged out of their homes.